I'm Reverend Paula Skiles with Unity Church of San Marcos. Like many of you, I grew up with a religion that treated the universe in many parts: God and heaven above, earth and humans in between, the devil and hell below. And through life's events and things that have occurred, I found myself changing in my beliefs and changing as a result of what I consider to be more information than what I was taught. And that no longer satisfied the things that I needed to understand in life and the way I needed to experience God. And it was such an experience that helped me to understand where God is. And my message is titled Where God Is. Have you ever wondered about where God is in all these beliefs? I have a series. This one is the first of 3 messages for the soul. And it's meant to help you and me and many others to have a greater connection to God, to Spirit. And for you and me to listen to the average person, they usually speak of God in cliches, the man in the sky, or the man upstairs, or someone up there loves me, or when I go to meet my maker. And this all literally comes from a God in the sky concept. A man with long flowing robes or a white beard or some of those kinds of things. But a big and good man, yes, but still a man in the sky somewhere. Perceiving spirit, to me, is how I came into a different belief, one that I feel is larger than God out there, and one that has really served me so beautifully, and I am trying to share in order for you to maybe have a better connection and a stronger sense of God in your life. There are so many people today that have not experienced a sense of God, or that they don't have a sense of there even being a God. And if you're listening to this message today and that's something that you have been experiencing, maybe by the end of this message you will think a little more and it'll touch something within you, and that is my hope. So the concept lingers even for those of us, because I admit, God in the sky, God out there, those trainings, those beginning beliefs, they stick pretty deep. And I have found that sometimes whenever things are really difficult, I have difficulty sometimes in not trying to search outside instead of just going still and being still within and connecting. And in those times when I'm having those difficulties, I find myself, I still perceive spirit as, just a presence. Yes, I do some denials and some affirmations. Yes, but I'm disconnected from the source. And I'll talk about that a little more in just a few moments. Because what it really means is that you and I are looking out there to the great healer, to source, or for source. And all it means is you and I continue to look at our problems not through God's eyes, but through the problem. We're looking at the problem through the problem. And it holds us in that problem. It holds us stuck in a feeling of that being bigger or greater than Spirit is or God is. And so Our challenge is to see the problem through God's eyes. Now, how can you and I do that? How can we move beyond this elusive problem of seeking a God out there in order to be centered and to be filled with that Spirit of God and stop looking at Spirit as the answer man? Fortunately, life today, I have found, for so many people, cause us to have a larger concept of God. And if you are not seeing your problems through God's eyes, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel panic. You're going to feel anxiety and so many other things, rather than a peace of mind or a sense of rightness about your ability to effectively deal or to see things in a way that you can know that which would be the greater thing for you to do. And so I'm reminded that the most important insight that you and I can have is the one that was articulated and demonstrated by Jesus Christ, and that is the kingdom of God within. And so I offer this thought. What do you believe about God? And when you think about this, here's something to think about. You know what you believe by how you act. And I think that's so important, I'll repeat it. You know what you believe by how you act. Even if you think you're not sure what you believe about God, how you act will tell you what you believe. Can you reveal God? Can I reveal God to another person? No more than I can eat their food for them or breathe the air for them or learn their lessons for them. Those of us who've been parents often wish we could have learned our lessons learned the children's lessons instead of them having to learn them themselves. And yet we know the truth is that's something that is good for them ultimately, is to learn for themselves. And so I am reminded of a quote from Emily Cady. She wrote in Lessons in Truth, "So our search for God must be within ourselves by thinking and feeling the ideas that make up the nature of God. Therefore, it is necessary to think with the intellect or the unconscious phase of mind, as well as to feel with our subconscious phase, which sometimes we call the heart. And so we are able to connect our mind and our heart whenever we are looking to experience the presence of God. And even though someone can tell you and me about God, can't actually know God until you experience the presence that is brought into our awareness. So to be conscious of something is to know it with your whole being. And the awareness and understanding of spirit and truth is an inner process. You and I learn to recognize someone by association. And the same thing is true of the presence. It is by association, it is by experiencing and having a relationship with God that we recognize that presence when it is always around. And we can connect and see that in just a blink of an eye. I'm reminded of a thought from Walter Rauschenbusch. In a moment, in the turning of a thought, I am where God is. So with that in mind, what part of what we would need to incorporate then into our understanding is what the amazing mystic monk Meister Eckhart said. We must come into a transformed knowing, an unknowing, which comes not from ignorance but from knowledge. In effect, you and I would need to let go of previously held beliefs, such as God out there, or the big man God in the sky with white beard and long flowing robes, so floating in the sky, or sitting on a throne. And allow those beliefs to be transformed to what, beyond what you have believed, to knowing truth. Moving beyond ignorance into truth. Now, truth is something that is actually a viable concept. It is part of the Word that God has created. And by that I mean it is a word that in and of itself has an integrity to it. You and I can add nothing to it. It has a force and an energy and a power that when it comes into our awareness, we know we have experienced the truth. And so you might be saying, I cannot feel God's presence in any way. And you would be correct, because it's not in your power to experience God. Because here's the rub. You and I have to be in a state of silence. We have to still our thinking, and we have to connect, whether it's through meditation, prayer, just be still. And moving beyond all of our plans for the next day or all what we've got to get done, even though we've assigned some precious few minutes of our life to sit and talk to God, so to speak, it's listening. It's the listening that we need in order to know where God is and to experience that presence. And that listening time is when we're not thinking about all the other things or what we need to say next, or any of those things. This is what Jesus meant when he was speaking to Nicodemus, and he said, the Spirit breathes where it will. You hear its voice, but do not know where it comes from or where it is going. It is the presence of God that comes into us when we're still. Because God's presence is always there. It's just you and I can only be aware of it. Can Spirit make itself known when we are still? Because God is not whimsical or punishing us or being choosy about who God reveals itself to. I mean, that's just not part of what Spirit is. Here's the reason. The present moment. Spirit is only in the present moment. God's not living in the past. God's not living in the future. And so if you and I are trying to be still and we're thinking about all of our plans or our regrets and our anger or any of those things, past and the future, resentments, hurt, what we should have said, how we're going to do this or we need to do that, and this is taking too much time. In the stillness of our being is where we'll find God. All that other stuff, it's no wonder we find it so hard to find God or to feel God's presence. And so it is in that stillness that Spirit makes itself known and felt. This is a very important aspect of being able to understand and know where God is. We occasionally need to refresh ourselves and our minds with the vision of Paul's sermon on Mars Hill from Acts 17:23 to 28. He made the world and everything in it. Being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by man. Does he serve by human hands as though he is anything, since he gives to all life? All man, life and breath and everything? He is not far from each one of us, for in him we live, move, and have our being. Great throngs of people stream into churches and synagogues, ostensibly to let them feel the presence or get close to God. But if you feel the presence of God in a church, it is because you are there. You feel it. You feel it. You are there. The feeling is the presence that you've brought in with you. It's always with you. For you and I to really think of ourselves as one with Spirit, because this is what Jesus kept trying to tell us to open to. The kingdom of God was within us. And to connect as he did, seeing God as Papa, as Abba, as just a connection that is so familiar and so wonderful and sweet, like that relationship that many of us have had with our own father or mother. I offer this concept. It's like this. When Jesus would not be tempted. It's not that he could not be tempted. He would not be tempted. And just knowing that Jesus could be tempted tells me that Jesus, and this is maybe a new concept for some of you, that Jesus was not very God, as some of our traditions tell us, but a man who was learning to express that Son of God, that unique aspect we call the Christ, that fullness of God within each of us and within him. And so I go back to Jesus would not be tempted. Can you hold that as a realization for you? Can you hold that Jesus was a regular person who connected and differentiated between the ways that he chose to live in this world and the ways that he believed in God? He was raised with a specific belief, and he held to those beliefs. And yet at the same time, he was able to take it deeper and to know even more of God. And so that he could experience the godness, the wholeness within himself, and allow himself to fully be the Christ, becoming one with that, to where God is, so was Jesus. Oneness. Using the power of the spoken word, filled with divine life, he spoke commandingly, "Get thee hence." And he was speaking to not the devil out there or below. He was speaking to that constant voice we have within ourselves, or the adversary, if you will, because that is what Satan really means. It translates the adversary. He was speaking from that sense of divine life within him. He was saying, there is only one power that I serve, and only one. And he was using a denial and an affirmation that came from within the life of God within him. And he was holding that and saying to that part of his own human consciousness, you have no place here. All these temptations, you have no place here. I will not move that way. I will hold in consciousness God. And that was his choice, because he had a choice. If he was very God, he could not be tempted. Do you see the difference? He could not be tempted as God, but as a human, he would not be tempted. I've heard it said God is a circle whose center is everywhere, but whose circumference is nowhere. So let's think about that. Imagine this. I mean, I've heard this. It's a classic truth of God that I have heard, and it makes so much sense. But just could you imagine trying to draw that? Well, we've got our circle, and the circumference is nowhere, and the center is everywhere? Okay, so saying that, perhaps maybe we could use imagery. Think about it maybe from this perspective. How about we think about maybe from the universe. We're in the center of the universe, and points of light are all around us. The sun and moon are not right there, but just points of light. And that it's unlimited, unboundless. And you and I can maybe hold in our mind that center. And you at that center of the universe. And everything stretches out from you. There's no circumference and no limit. In the circle of the universe, you are the center. Spirit is what you and I turn to, whether we call it God or Elohim or Yahweh or any number of wonderful words that we have used as human beings to give voice to our world, a sense of presence. And in the face of any conflict or problem or emergency, you and I, it's important that we be able to recapture that sense of being that Spirit is. And that Spirit is right where we are. In your work, when you're feeling harassed, or you've got these responsibilities of management that you've been given, or problems with physical issues, your whole body seems to be falling apart maybe. And as we age, that's generally true. We sense that whole thing happening. But to do like Jesus, get the hints to the idea of God out there, you get still and center yourself at the center of the universe. There's no place where God is not. The whole of God is present in every point in space at the same time. In the face of any conflict or problem or emergency, let yourself get that image of being in the center and God's presence with you. There's the whole of God life present in your body. The whole of God's substance is present in your financial affairs. The whole of divine intelligence is present in your mind when you're facing difficult problems or challenges. Be still, realizing that you are where God is. That means you hold in consciousness. Hold in consciousness that sense of presence. And then experience that imagery and the universe rushing, streaming through you, in you, and around you, and infilling you, pouring into you from all sides. If you can get away from the thought of God out there and pleading for help, the divine ideas of power, peace of mind, health, life, joy, truth, rushing, streaming, pouring into you, coming in from all sides while you sit quiet. Because you and I need a larger concept of God. My concept of God is always expanding, and it's always moving beyond what I had yesterday. And I would encourage you to let yours do the same thing. Being one with God might be something you can't hold today, but as you sit in the presence, as you allow yourself to demonstrate God through who you are, the unique way you can experience it and express love or forgiveness or a helping hand or non-judgmentalism and being uncritical, then God becomes the ground or the depth of the force through which you and I see things correctly in a different way, one that doesn't hold criticism or judgment, one that is able to deal with things more effectively. In Unity, we have a very powerful poem that is actually even a prayer that ends stating, wherever I am, God is. It's true. It's true. It's so important that we understand what we're saying. And just so you understand what I'm trying to say here about us being able to be one with God, and that God is within you, the kingdom of heaven is within you, it's not like a chocolate chip cookie where you've got the chocolate chip in the cookie, or a fish in a glass of water or a bowl of water. Those are two separate things. The chocolate chip and the cookie dough. The fish and the water. They're always two items. Think of it this way if you can. God is an ocean as in a wave. God is in you as the ocean is in a wave. Think of that. Just as the ocean is in a wave. The world has form and shape and movement, and it's kind of like the waves. As they come in, they have a form, and they cannot be separated from the ocean. The wave is the ocean expressing as a wave, and you are the activity of God expressing as you. What do you think would happen if you let go of trying to find or contact God out there, the green pastures God or the figure with the white robes? Only you can answer that for yourself. But if it's a fearful answer, one that creates fear, I would offer to remind you, Jesus said God is spirit, and spirit is love. Love is one of those parts of God. God loves. And just as you and I love, it's part of the nature of us to love, to laugh through joy, to experience the sense and knowing of truth through our minds, an awareness, excuse me, an awareness of being able to connect when we are still, that you will know where God is and has always been, and that is with you. Meister Eckhart had a great concept of what he called being. Something he said goes like this: if all existence is God, nothing could exist apart from God. Essentially, he's saying everything in its essence or substance is God. God is being. So where God is, where I am, is where God is. And it's whatever situations you and I are in, is where God is. God bless you, and thank you for being with me today.